Hello everyone, this is Helios Raven. I tell you how to do it, even if you don't care. And today, in our lessons on how to play Battlefleet Gothic, the basic rules, we're going to talk about the next phase after shooting, which is the Ordnance phase. Now, Ordnance are your bombers, your fighters, your torpedoes, and hold on one second, and your assault boats. Now, let's see here, let's get a zoom in on these guys. Each one plays a different part, and they usually actually make little cardboard templates of these guys, but some of the vessels, actually they sell tiny miniatures to represent each one, and what I did was I cut the base stands out to match the size of the templates, just so it's a little bit more 3D. I never got to paint these guys, that's why they're jet black. And these basically represent like skyscraper-sized torpedoes and little tiny ships that fly around on the field. And there's sometimes, at least in my experience here, this is going to be a subject that is a little bit controversial and involves a lot of heavy debating, at least with some of the stuff when I do it. And so we're going to get started. Now, Ordnance is launched in the Ordnance phase. You declare, okay, like this ship right here, this ship is going to fire its ordnance, and so it decides to launch some bombers. So you then place the bombers where it's being launched from, and then they move on their movement phase. And after they're fired, on the beginning of your next turn, you have to make a command check to reload your ordnance. And if you pass, your ordnance is ready to use again. If you roll double sixes, then you run out of ordnance. You can't fire that ordnance anymore. It basically represents the fact that, you know, your ship just wasn't able to keep up or ran out of supplies to keep them going. And that's basically how that rule works with the ordnance phase. And the way it works is there's also an ordnance limit. The number of docking bays you have on your ships dictates how many ordnance fighters and bombers and such you can have on the field. Torpedoes are not affected by this because you can just keep launching wave after wave of torpedo. What are affected by it are your fighters. Like, let's say, for example, this ship right here. It's got 2 squadrons on a port and starboard launch base. So it has a total of 4 squadrons it can launch at any given time. So, say if I launch 3 here, right here I launch three squadrons of ships. I can't put out another 3. I can only put out 1 more, because once I put 1 more, 1, 2, 3, 4, I've hit my limit on ordnance. If for any reason your docking bays are reduced or a ship blows up or something, then you run out of ordnance, then you're going to have to remove ordnance pieces from the table because you no longer have the ability to sustain those numbers. And you can't combine ships and go, okay, that's 1 ordnance, okay, this is another ordnance to get more ships. Each squadron counts as 1 no matter how you slice it. And you basically, the way it works is you have your ships and your torpedoes. Let's just say this ship doesn't really have all of that, but we're just going to say for argument's sake. Okay, you get your vessel like this, so you have them set. Then on your ordnance phase, you move all of your ordnance first, and then the enemy moves theirs. And the each ordnance has its own range. Like, you know, bombers for the Imperial Navy have a range of 20 centimeters. Fighters have 30 centimeters. Torpedoes, I believe, have 30 centimeters. And so you move them all at their respective range. And depending on what happens to them will dictate what happens to what the outcome is when you get to your vessels. So these guys, the first thing that they have a couple of universal rules, which is, you know, you move them all, and they have one involving blast markers. Blast markers affect ships a little bit differently. The way they operate is if an ordnance marker or a torpedo servo goes through it, you have to roll a d6, 1 for each squadron and each servo, and on a roll of a 6 like this one, so this guy blows up. He gets destroyed. This one here, you roll another one. We rolled a 4, so this one's fine. And this guy here rolled a 6, this one's destroyed as well. So and for the torpedoes, because there's some people who ask me this a lot, with torpedoes, they all blow up if they get hit by a blast marker and you roll a 6. It's not, oh, you lose one or anything, it's the whole servo's gone. It's basically, think of it, if any of you guys ever watch like animes like Gundam, especially Gundam Seed, the main character will fire a gunshot, it'll hit one torpedo, and then you'll see 50 in the background blow up with it, even though the blast wasn't there. It's supposed to represent this one explodes, and its explosion causes the other one, hits the other torpedo and causes them to all go off. That's kind of a representation there. And also it's shooting ordnance. Ordnance may be fired upon by direct weapons. So, you have a ship here, it has some lances, it can fire at these vessels. With using weapon batteries, you would use the gunnery table and use the ordnance section. On lances, you would use direct fire, and you would need 6s in order to hit them. And if you hit to hit the ordnance, because they're different, if an ordnance marker is hit, it is removed from play. Any ordnance markers caught in Nova Cannon detonation are also removed. So, like this torpedo, it hits it with a lance marker, it goes kaboom, and everything gets destroyed. Same with these little squadron guys. You have 2 squadrons here, it hits one of them goes away. It hits twice, both of them go away. And that is the basic general rules for ordnance in terms of like regular rules. And they have one more universal rule, which is ordnance attacks. Ordnance if an ordnance marker comes into contact with a ship's base or another ordnance marker, it will immediately attack it with the effects detailed in the overleaf of all the immediately as detailed that we're going to talk about later. These ordnance also ignore shields and affect ships directly. So like say this guy here, he has no blast markers on him, so he has 4 shields. These 2 bombers go in and attack, they do their attacks and they do 5 points of damage. You don't put 4 blast markers here and then take 1 hit point. No, they actually slip through the shields and hit and blow up the ship. Essentially, it's supposed to be like, for some reason, the fighters are able to pass through the shield itself and hit and bombard the ship vessel directly. Sort of like how in like Star Wars, where they'd get really close to vessels and they'd blow up and the little tiny fighters would sit there and make little dent marks in the vessel, like in Return of the Jedi, where the A-wing blew up the shield generator, whereas the bigger ships couldn't handle it. It's kind of like that. The little ships are able to get in through the shields and blow up and do direct damage to it. So no shields are involved when you're attacking with ordnance. And at that point, we go into the specifics of each type of ordnance table, and the first one we're going to go with is torpedoes. Torpedoes launch, unless specifically noted by their race, in a straight line from the attacking ship. So this attacking ship launches them in forward. They fly 30 centimeters forward, and they keep on traveling until they come into base contact with the ship, friend or foe or Hulk or anything. It attacks the first thing it comes in contact with. And the way this works is, you would first go and attack you would determine the torpedo servo strength with this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 torpedoes in this servo, so I'd roll 6 dice. And I have to hit its armor, which is 5 on the side. And I roll. Okay, there's 3 misses so far, and no hits whatsoever. So what this means now is the torpedoes literally pass by the ship and continue moving. So say if it hits here and it only moved 10 centimeters and it missed all those shots, it would then continue moving 20 centimeters past the vessel and continue going forward. Now let's just say, for argument's sake, 3 shots hit. Well, then that's 3 damage dealt to the ship, to the vessel itself, and then 3 torpedoes that miss continue forward in its attacking arc past it. So basically, there's a chance to get 2 ships, or if you miss with 1 ship, you may hit the ship behind it, which is really neat. It kind of represents that the torpedoes literally missed the vessel entirely and went, like, under or through the vessel itself, which is, I think, really neat. And then they just continue on till they hit something or fly off the board. Now, there are ways of pre-detonation of torpedoes. First one is roll on a 6 when it moves through a blast marker. That removes them, like we talked about. Also, if the servo is fired on by direct fire weapon and a hit is scored, and if it hits another torpedo marker. So basically, if it does hit another torpedo marker, it goes boom, both of them blow up and get destroyed. And so this is basically how and this affects the entire servo, not just, oh, there's 3 here, so only 3 get affected. No, this is, again, represents that one explosion hits one and causes that one to explode in a whole chain reaction. And there's also a thing called boarding torpedoes. Boarding torpedoes are man-operated torpedoes. So, at the beginning of their turn, but let's see, they are manned, so they may turn up to 45 degrees at the start of the ordnance phase. So here, these torpedoes can then turn 45 degrees and then continue on its move. The exception to this rule is the turn they're fired. So when they're launched from the ship, so this is turn 1, they go here, these are boarding torpedoes, they launch forward, and not turn them. Next turn, okay, 45 degree turn, and they move. They can opt for ignoring hulks, but must attack any the boarding attack if they come into contact with an enemy ship's base. You contact a hit and run attack immediately, and they may elect to ignore hulks, but must attack the first enemy ship they come in contact with. And hit and run attacks we'll talk about a little bit later. Those are actually a little bit more advanced rules, so we're going to talk about them in a moment when we get up to the advanced stuff. And that's basically all I can say in the allotted time I have today. I know I rambled a little bit, I apologize, and I know some of you are thinking I am forgetting a rule. I am not forgetting one of the rules here. I just want to talk about all the different rules involving the craft first, and then I'm going to talk about ships' defenses against the ordnance markers. So we're going to continue this in another video when we talk about fighters, bombers, and assault boats. So, until next time, this is Helios Raven, signing off.